Good evening. We have a somewhat different program this holiday evening. As America celebrates more than 2 centuries of independence, we look at a nation barely 2 years old. It is Zimbabwe, the former British colony of Rhodesia in Central Africa, racked by years of war between white diehards and African guerrillas. Now its president, Robert Mugabe, struggles to satisfy the revolutionary appetites of 7 million blacks while trying to reassure a dwindling population of whites. How he's succeeding is the subject of this report, edited from a recent BBC documentary. The narrator is Ali Mazrui, a Kenyan-born political scientist who now teaches at the University of Michigan.
This is Great Zimbabwe, once the flourishing capital of a great Shona kingdom. These are the corridors of power, the passages of privilege of an ancient African civilization. For 600 years, these walls have stood here, although they were built without mortar. The walls themselves are an impressive testimony that Africans are capable of a uniqueness which the white man has not always recognized. But the great kingdom of Zimbabwe did not last. Perhaps it was a failure of social institutions. The effectiveness of the government and the economic skills available failed to keep pace with the needs of what had, after all, become a rather complex society. Alongside this political decay, there might have been ecological imbalances. The soil no longer able to support an expanding population. A fuel crisis as trees for firewood were excessively depleted. Land overgrazed. Desolation setting in. At any rate, Great Zimbabwe foundered and withered away. 5 centuries later, Robert Mugabe is trying to build up a new Zimbabwe. But what kind of pattern is he following? Is he trying to follow the pattern of my own Kenya, a model of racial reconciliation and private enterprise? Or is Mugabe seeking to create another Mozambique, a model of revolution and a state-controlled economy? Or is he, in fact, seeking to rediscover the uniqueness which is embodied in this remarkable monument to ancient Zimbabwe?
People voted for him because they were hungry for change. But can their sense of national renewal be sustained for long? Enthusiasm is a perishable commodity. Perhaps that's why Mugabe vilifies his adversaries as a popular way to mobilize support. Mugabe is also trying a policy of reconciliation, an olive branch to those same adversaries. It's a strategy very much in the Kenyan mold. Mobilization is more like Mozambique. Both policies are expected to flourish under the umbrella of Mugabe's one-party state. Whether all Zimbabweans are yet ready to be part of Mugabe's people is another matter. Many whites still live in a Rhodesia of their own. Judging by the Kenyan parallel, that will last a long time. Martin Luther King used to argue that desegregation was not integration, that ending the color bar was not enough to bring the races together in America. It's equally true in Zimbabwe. But it's more than a lack of harmony. 2,000 whites are leaving every month, and that's a bigger exodus than Kenya's in the same period. I've spent about 3 weeks here, and I think during those 3 weeks, I've probably heard more racist remarks than I hear in a year or two in the United States, or than I have heard in Kenya since the 1950s. Can you explain the phenomenon?
It's become so ingrained now. It's something to talk about, something to ridicule, to be unkind, but, you know, it's just a pastime, and it's something very difficult to shed from oneself. But I think those people that are left here now don't really mean it. It's merely a talking point.
You've got to give us time to get to know each other. You know, on a certain level, we do know each other. Some of us have friends in all sorts of groups. But generally speaking, people have got to have time to get to know each other. There's still a lot of, not fear, but ignorance about the different races.
I've heard at least one major political figure in this country argue that this is the most magnanimous post-war arrangement that's taken place anywhere. The man himself was black, and he said, here were people who are hanging us a few months ago. Here were people who are hunting us down, and now there they are interacting with us in parliamentary exchanges. Where else has this sort of thing happened so soon after the war? What's your response? Do you think the blacks have been magnanimous towards the whites?
Yes.
Well,
I do.
there's no doubt that we have been surprised at the leadership displayed by Robert Mugabe. He said reconciliation. I think he's a pragmatic and very clever man, a very competent man. And he sized up the situation very well. And he said that the way to get this thing off the ground is to put forward a very strong message of reconciliation and harmony.
Right.
And he succeeded brilliantly.
Hello, people.
Joshua Nkomo is less ready with praise. In February, he was sacked from the cabinet. You can't have two top men in a new country, even though the fragile alliance between the two parties has survived. After 30 years at the head of the nationalist struggle, Nkomo is now on the sidelines, the latest stage in a historic tribal, regional, and personal rivalry. Mugabe moved against him after hordes of arms were found on property belonging to Nkomo's party. Enough to start a war, said Mugabe.
If Mugabe had treated those arms as we have treated other arms we have discovered, and then together tried to discover who was responsible without making a noise about it and handling it as government, at the time when I was still minister, we could have handled this as government, and I could have handled as leader of ZAPU to discover what happened. But I was never given a chance. I was accused and everything. It was a political hullabaloo. There was so much insult on me and all over in the papers and radios and television. Now, that was very unfortunate, very disruptive, very blanksmanship.
This is a failure.
This part of it really I did not expect, and it's a sad chapter in the history of our independence. Very sad one.
The repercussions of the Nkomo affair are still being felt. The workers on Zimbabwe's largest vegetable farm have now been caught up in the conflict. They are all on notice from the government. The farm was owned by ZAPU, Nkomo's party. When arms were discovered on other properties, the Niger company was also declared unlawful and a liquidator appointed. Soldiers kept guard. The government's case is that Niger was helping finance a future Nkomo takeover and that the farm was in a strategic position close to Salisbury. So, if there are rotten tomatoes here tomorrow and 400 out of work, it will be because of a political struggle that's still not resolved after 2 decades. Do you feel the political noose getting tighter around your neck, if I may so put it? Do you feel vulnerable?
My neck is very big.
As Churchill said, some neck.
It's very big, my dear, for that type of thing.
But do you think you could be detained?
Not that I've been detained before, it doesn't mean a thing.
In the struggle to rebuild or redesign Zimbabwe, land is pretty central. It was, after all, what the war was all about. Thousands of young African men and women left their villages, their homesteads, to join the ranks of the fighters. They were fighting for land, as well as for liberty, for farming, as well as for freedom. When you look at it, they were, in fact, giving up their lives, and over 20,000 of them perished in the war. And yet, when a visitor comes to Zimbabwe, he is struck by how much land there is. 7.5 million people sharing 40 million hectares of land. Statistically, that comes down to over 10 acres for every man, woman, and child in the country.
But there is a real problem of distribution. 5,000 white farmers own as much land as 6 million Africans. Partly because the first settlers took the best land in Rhodesia, and partly because of their superior skills, the white farmers became the backbone of the country's economy, alongside its mineral wealth. Jim Sinclair is president of the Commercial Farmers Union. His case is that European farms produce 3 or 4 times the output on African communal land, and that the economy simply can't do without them. He also argues that since commercial farmers are the biggest employers in the land, any large-scale move to dispossess them could leave thousands unemployed. Sinclair's farm adjoins an African communal area, the chance to show visitors the contrast between farming styles.
The left-hand side of the fence that you're looking at produces 88% of the food marketed in this country. The right-hand side of the fence produces 12. That is the difference, and that's the important factor. We believe that not only from the employment point of view, from the effective use of land, from the efficient use of land, from the benefits derived from the land, that the chap working for a commercial farmer is better off than a guy under a resettlement scheme.
A related point is whether you are making enough allowances for what appears to be a genuine hunger for land in this country, and also for what appears